My name is Elizabeth and I'm here to talk about books. Today, more specifically, about 5 non-fiction books about ancient history, or as an alternative title for this video, 5 books where you don't need a synopsis if you've read the title. So 2 of these books are fairly general in topic and then 3 are a bit more specific. So I'm going to start off with the general ones. And first of those is Civilization Before Greece and Rome by H.W.F. Sachs. As you might have guessed, this is a book about civilization before Greece and Rome. Okay, I can be a bit more specific than that. This deals with the period from about 3000 BC to 500 BC in what is most commonly known as the Near East or Western Asia, if you want to look at it from a different geographical standpoint, but generally speaking the area from the Mediterranean and towards the Persian Gulf. It also includes Egypt. Delves slightly into the Minoan culture at Crete and also the Indus Valley in India, but mostly it focuses on like Mesopotamia, Assyria, the Hittites and Egypt. The other one I have that's fairly general is 4,000 Years Ago by Geoffrey Beebe. This covers basically the same area, except this also tries to draw a very sketchy outline of the rest of the world as well. Kind of lacks the research. And then this delves specifically into one century, namely the one starting 2000 BC and ending 1000 BC, so it's slightly narrower in time. However, reading these two at the same time was actually a very cool experience, because even though there is a fair amount of overlap between them, they were different enough for it to make sense to read them together. And actually I think reading them together made the whole overall reading experience better, because they are fairly different when it comes to point of view. This is the one I kept holding up, because this is what I would call a fairly standard history book. It's told from the vantage point of the historian. So the person telling you what's going on knows everything at once, sort of. You get the general overview of periods, you get the ebb and flow of empires, you get the big names, the big events, the trends, and you see sort of these people we meet here will become important later in the story, stuff like that. It's a very good book from what I gather. This has been like the go-to book as a start point for learning about ancient history, and I can see why. It's clear, it's written in clear prose, it's very well organized, it's easy to follow along even if you haven't read a lot about the topic going into this, and even if you have read some stuff about the topics, I'm sure you can find new stuff in here that you won't know. So overall, just a very solid history book, I would say. This is organized into chapters, each divided by theme. So you have a chapter for religion, you got one for law, you got one for buildings like pyramids and ziggurats, you got one for writing, you got one for education, and so on and so forth. And as I said, very well organized, clearly written. I would definitely recommend this if you want to learn more about ancient history going on from like the earliest civilizations where we have written sources from. 4,000 Years Ago, however, was kind of a different take on history, because Geoffrey Beebe here wants to get away from this vantage point of the historian and to come closer to the people actually living in these times. He calls it getting on the ground. Getting on the ground with the people living the history. Because, as you say, when you are a historian, 50 years, 100 years seem like a very short period of time, and you can often just pass by 50 years in a sentence. But when you live through 50 years or 70 years, it is a really long time. It's actually a lifetime. So in this book, each chapter covers 70 years, which is what Bibi deems a lifetime. And each chapter starts off with someone being born, and we will follow this person or this group of persons throughout the chapter through their lifetime. So we will see this period, these 70 years, from their point of view, and see what will they experience during their lifetime, what events will they see, what things in their society will change while they are alive, what kind of stories will their parents and grandparents tell them, and what kind of other stories will by now be mere legend or myth. And I really liked this way of hearing about the history, because I got a way more personal feeling of time in this than I would ever get in a history book like this. That's upside down, and yeah, you know, because when you read the timeline, it's just words on a paper, but reading it like this made it feel like time were passing in a different way. And I think because of that, this is the kind of book I would really recommend someone to start with, because at least for me, getting this feeling for the timeline made it so much easier reading a book like this, where you can just fill in the information into a timeline that I had internalized in a different way than I do normally do when I read history book, without like cramming the years and dates. So I really enjoy that. The drawback of telling a story like this is accuracy, because you can't really get close to people and then give a lot of alternate versions of what happened. So what he does here is that whenever there's a conflict of theories about cause of events, he will choose one and he will stick to that throughout the chapter. And where we don't know what happened, he will give a version that he deems to be the most likely version. And then at the end of each chapter, he will summarize what things in the chapter were based on written sources, what's based on archaeological sources, what is mere conjecture, and what is maybe pure fiction. So he's not really fooling you in any way. He plays with his cards open, but for the sake of narrative, he will make choices during the chapters that will probably annoy some historians reading this, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I actually really enjoyed both of them, and I would definitely recommend both. This was published in 1988 and this in 1961, so they're not the most up-to-date books on the topic, but obviously I'm not going to only read one book about ancient history. I mean, I have 5 books in this video alone, so I'm fine with reading older books, and then I can maybe read newer books and get the latest developments in the research another time. Moving on to the slightly more specific, we have Life in the Ancient Near East by Daniel C. Snell. This was published in 1997, so slightly newer than the other two. There's also a fair amount of overlap between this and the other two, but this focuses solely on the Near East or Western Asia. It uses both terms throughout the book, and it's more specifically about living conditions. So it kind of skips the big historical events and battles and empire building and stuff like that, and it focuses on what it was like to live in these times. So it looks into real estate, who was owning real estate, how was it transferred from one person to the next, looks at how was it to be a woman, what kind of rights did you have as a woman, what kind of occupations did you have, what role did slavery play, and trade, stuff like that, all connected to specific living conditions. And another thing that makes this slightly less general than the other is that this is written with academics in mind, complete with an afterword suggesting further research needing to be done in the area. I would say this is slightly drier reading than the other two because it's just more fact-based. It's more listings of things we know. It's kind of repetitive, going on and on about the same things over different time frames during the entire 2 millennia it covers. So, for instance, you will hear the same sentence about marriage many times, that for the ruling classes polygamy was a possibility, but for normal people monogamy was the main rule. Then on to something completely different that lies very close to my own heart, and that's this book on cuneiform, written by Irving Finkel and Jonathan Taylor. So this, to nobody's big surprise, is a book about cuneiform writing, which is the system of writing used to write on clay tablets, and the reason we know as much as we do about events as far back as 5,000 years ago. This is the first known writing system in the world, and I have a huge fascination for this. Whenever I'm in London or Paris or Berlin or Oxford, I seem to come home with like 2 pictures of the city and then 500 pictures of cuneiform tablets taken at museums. Because of that, this book is kind of perfect for me because it's a lot of big pictures of cuneiform tablets. I can't really explain why I'm that fascinated by watching cuneiform writing on tablets, because I can't read it. I mean, I don't know cuneiform writing, I don't really know any of the signs, and even if I did, it wouldn't help me because I don't speak Sumerian or Akkadian or any of the other languages written in cuneiform. So I just like looking at all of the stones, obviously, for some reason. However, this is a short book and it's just a clean-cut introduction to this writing system, but I still found this very interesting because even though it's a tiny book and lots of big pictures, so not really all that much writing, what writing there was very informative, very to the point, and it answered many questions I have had that I've never found the answer to in other books, because I feel what I've read about cuneiform in other books have been very general and very just an overview, and it's been statements more than explanations, whereas this book actually explained things to me by examples, which I really enjoyed. So for instance, a thing I have read over and over again is that cuneiform developed from a pictogram kind of script to a syllabic script, but I've never seen how, whereas this book actually showed me one example of a sign. It was a pictogram, the meaning of it, how that sign was then simplified, and how that new simplified sign came to refer to a syllable. And that also explains why you needed to know Sumerian to be able to write in Akkadian, because you needed to know what syllable a sign was referring to in the original Sumerian texts. So it wasn't the easiest system to learn to write, and that there's also a chapter about how it was taught and how it was how it developed through times. It's also so practical that it tells us just how the tablets, how the physical tablets were made, what were used to write on them, how that was made, the shape of it, what kind of movements you made to do the writing, stuff like that. So for me this was really interesting, and I also very much appreciated the bibliography in the back of this, because it was very specific about giving me topics. If you want to know more about this, here are 2 books we recommend to read. if you want to know more about this aspect of it, here's another 2 or 3 books. So this is definitely going to be one of those books that leads me to other books, and I really like books like that. The last book in this video is one that made me really want a time machine, so if anyone could just get on with inventing one, I would be very grateful. And that is The 7 Wonders of the Ancient World, edited by Peter Clayton and Martin Price. So this is a book about the 7 wonders of the ancient world. I guess you've heard of them. I had, but I could not have named all 7 of them prior to reading this book. You want some help? I'll try. So you have the pyramids, you got the Artemis Temple at Ephesus, you got the Colossus of Rhodes, you got the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, you got the Pharos Lighthouse in Egypt, you got the statue of Zeus at Olympus, and you got the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. So each of the wonders get 1 chapter each in this book, and then you have an introduction and an epilogue, making it 9 chapters in total. And it's a fairly short book because there's not all that much we know about the wonders. The only ones still standing are the pyramids. The rest perished already in ancient times. So what we do know of them we have from ancient sources, and to some extent also from archaeology. This book was written by 7 different people, written 1 chapter each. Definitely enjoyed some more than the others. I would say I kind of struggled with the chapter about the Artemis Temple because there was just so many architectural details in that text, that lots of words I didn't know. But for someone else that might just be the best chapter because of the same reasons. But overall I found this very interesting, very educational, because as I said, I didn't know all of these, and I certainly didn't know how much or how little we knew about each of them before going into this. I also appreciated that there's lots of quotes from the original sources where we know of these wonders or buildings or structures, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, cool book about something I didn't know about, and now I do know about it. That's what books are for, I guess. So that was all I had for you today. A slightly awkward video from someone who is fairly new to this. Even though I did make 11 videos like almost 2 years ago, this very much feel like my first. But I intend to try to stick with it this time, and I have a feeling that I'm not quite done with ancient history yet, although I promise there will be some fiction on here as well. But for now, I think that my next reads about ancient history will probably be more primary sources, like The 12 Caesars by Suetonius, or I have Herodotus by, not by, he is the author, but histories by him. And then I also have this collection of primary sources from the period that I have been reading about here. So for instance, Gilgamesh in original, except of course translated into English, because as I said, I don't read either Sumerian or Akkadian. Even though I did try to learn Akkadian once, but my uni didn't have enough sign-ups for the class, so it never happened. Anyways, that's all for today. Maybe I'll see you around. Bye bye!